Corporal Elena Ramirez didn't mind the silence. In fact, she preferred it. Up on the ridge, the wind swept over the jagged Afghan mountains like a whispered warning, carrying dust, dry heat, and the occasional echo of distant gunfire. From her small outpost, a dug-in overwatch station carved into the rock with nothing but canvas netting for cover, she had an unbroken view of the valley below. Her hands moved with habit, adjusting the radio dials, logging patrol coordinates, checking the battery levels on the long-range comms pack strapped at her back. She was support. Nothing more. At least, that's what everyone told her. Even if they didn't say it out loud. To the others in Echo Patrol, Ramirez was the one who made sure their comms didn't cut out in the middle of a sweep. She passed along recon info, marked movement on her rugged touchscreen tablet, and made sure someone always knew where they were on the grid. Necessary? Absolutely? Respected? Hardly. She rarely got more than a nod at morning briefings. Sometimes, a thanks when they were in a good mood. Usually not. She didn't blame them. Infantry soldiers got used to seeing the world through their own crosshairs. To them, Ramirez was the girl on the hill with the head set out of the way, out of danger, and certainly out of the story. But Elena hadn't signed up for the army to be invisible. She'd grown up in Santa Fe, the daughter of a single mother and a former Border Patrol officer turned mechanic. She joined at 19, believing the army would give her a path out, a purpose, a way to matter. And she'd trained harder than anyone expected. While most communication techs stuck to laptops and radios, she volunteered for weapons. Proficiency courses. Qualified on the M4, the M249, and eventually the DMR-designated marksman rifle. She didn't brag about it. She just wanted to be ready. Just in case. But after deployment, just in case became not your job. And her rifle stayed locked away in the Ridge supply crate. Today was supposed to be another ordinary patrol. Echo. Team was sweeping the far end of the valley near a cluster of crumbling mud brick compounds. Intelligence suggested possible IED activity, a hotspot for local insurgents. Nothing too active, nothing too risky. Just enough danger to keep the adrenaline high. Just enough for the grunts to feel useful. Ramirez had been dropped on the ridge the evening prior by a Black Hawk, along with 2 crates of gear, a week's supply of MREs, and a drone tablet with an encrypted uplink. She set up her position before nightfall. By morning, her boots were coated in dust, and her eyes locked on the patrol dot blips slowly creeping across the screen. Through her binoculars, she watched Echo Patrol form a staggered column along the dry creek bed. Sergeant Kessler led up, front, tall and broad-shouldered, with the confident swagger of a man who had done 3 tours and thought he'd seen everything. He was good at his job, no question. But he had the blind spot many field leaders developed, an aversion to input that didn't come from someone carrying a rifle in the mud. Ramirez adjusted her headset and toggled over to the command channel. Echo. Actual Ridge Point 1. Comes green. I've got eyes on you all the way to marker 7. Copy? She said, calm and steady. Copy that, Ridge Point. Appreciate it, came Kessler's voice, clipped and distracted. Appreciate it. That was something. As they advanced, Elena zoomed in on thermal feeds and drone pings. Every few seconds, she double-checked the recon data. No red flags yet, but something wasn't sitting right. A gut feeling, no data to back it up. Just instinct. The valley seemed too quiet. No dogs barking from the village. No movement from nearby farms. Even the goat herders, who usually wandered through the area on narrow trails, were nowhere to be seen. A set of footprints near a dry well caught her attention through the drone camera. Too fresh, headed in the opposite direction. Of any expected travel. She tapped her screen, marking it. Something about them felt deliberate. Echo actual ridge point. Recommend a soft sweep at compound cluster 4. No visible movement, but something seems off. Possible recent evac. Copy? There was a pause. Noted. We're keeping it tight. Proceeding as planned. Noted. That was Kessler speak for, we're ignoring that. Elena exhaled through her nose and leaned back against a sun-warmed boulder. Her role didn't come with authority. She advised, not commanded. And if they ignored her, well, that was part of the job. Still, the silence nagged at her dot. She raised her binoculars again, sweeping from left to right. The terrain was dry and dead cracked earth and broken stones. But in the shadows of a rock ledge, something shifted. A shimmer. A hint of motion too precise for nature. She blinked, focused in. Nothing. Maybe just nerves, maybe not. She checked the clock. Echo Patrol was 20 minutes from their next checkpoint. If there was something waiting for them, they'd walk right into it before the hour turned. And up on her lonely ridge, Elena Ramirez would be the only one watching it happen. She didn't know it yet, but in less than half an hour, everything would change. Support wouldn't mean what it used to. Not after today. The ridge was still. Corporal Elena Ramirez adjusted the strap of her headset and scanned the valley again. The early sun glared off her lens, casting golden streaks across the rugged terrain. She blinked them away. Her eyes burned from hours of staring, her fingers twitching every few seconds over her console and rifle sling. Not that she needed the rifle. Not today. She was the quiet one, the watcher. She wasn't down there kicking in doors or checking alleys for snipers. She wasn't supposed to take risks. Her job was to see, hear, relay. That was it, but she never stopped watching. Through her high-powered binoculars, Echo Patrol looked like toy soldiers moving along a gray-brown patchwork of mud, dust, and crumbling rock. She'd memorized their positions. Kessler up front, Corporal Lane with the squad's heavy gun, Staff Sergeant Doyle taking the rear. The whole patrol was sharp combat-hardened and well-rehearsed. But even pros got lazy in quiet valleys, especially ones that had been cleared a dozen times over. Elena had learned one thing early. There's no such thing as a routine patrol in Afghanistan. Every valley had a ghost. Every corner a shadow. She kept her thermal drone feed open on a split screen beside her. Dull white figures moved like ants across the screen. Her team. So far, no anomalies, but something nagged her. The usual background. Heat signatures, goats, people in homes, fires, animals weren't there. It was sterile, cold, like someone had erased the living map. Her comms chirped. Ridge point, this is Echo Actual. Reaching checkpoint 6. Anything showing? Negative, Echo Actual, she replied. Thermals clear. No visible movement in compounds 4 through 6. Trails quiet, skies are calm, wind south-southeast. Recommend caution. Environment seems artificially still. There was a pause. Then, copy, proceeding. Keep eyes sharp. That was all she needed. No sarcastic remark. No brush off. Kessler was listening now. She zoomed in on the compound nearest the team's path. A toppled wheelbarrow lay near the corner of a crumbling clay wall. A plastic tarp flapped half-heartedly in the breeze. Still no people. Not even birds on the rooftops. That wasn't right. On instinct, she switched her feed to a different drone angle. This one had a wide view from above the village. Something caught her eye, what looked like deep tire marks. Fresh, maybe from a motorbike or a pickup truck. Headed out of the village in a hurry. Fast, irregular turns. Not supply delivery, that was for sure. Echo Actual, she radioed. Unknown tracks east of compound cluster. Possible recent departure. Suggest bypassing cluster 4. No response. Then static. She tapped her headset. Echo actual? Confirm last transmission? Silence. Frowning, Alana stood and adjusted the dish. Nothing blocked the signal. She reset her frequency, ran a quick diagnostic, and got a green light. Comms were fine. It wasn't her system, it was them. They'd gone dark. A ripple of anxiety pushed into her chest. Comms didn't just drop. Not like this. Not with line of sight and strong signal. She toggled to the drone feed again. Still tracking movement. Echo Patrol hadn't stopped. They were approaching a dried creek bed, now steep banks on either side. Natural choke point. High walls, bad visibility. Elena's pulse ticked up. Through her scope, she caught motion to the far left, barely more than a flicker behind a low wall. Not the patrol. Something else. She dialed in. Waited. Nothing. Then again, a shape. A slow shift of shadow, like someone ducking into cover. She blinked and leaned forward. Adrenaline surged. Elena, breathe. She whispered to herself. She pulled up the drone again and initiated a thermal sweep. 3 warm spots, not moving. Lying prone. Waiting. The drones, I flagged them as unidentified combatants likely armed. It felt like ice water poured down her back. Elena to Echo actual. Do you copy? She said, more urgent now. Unknown thermal contacts, 400 meters northeast of your current path. 3 prone, likely concealed shooters. Confirm status? Still nothing. Alana's eyes darted to the patrol on the scope. They kept moving unaware, exposed. The radio was dead. Drone feed was live. They were walking straight into a death funnel, and nobody knew it but her. Panic itched at her ribs, but she pushed it down. She'd trained for this, hadn't she? But training never mentioned this feeling. The helplessness of seeing the danger and not being able to stop it. She checked her backup radio. Switched frequencies. Nothing. Static. Elena stood up slowly, brushing dirt off her knees. The wind was picking up now, howling gently around the ridge. She glanced back at the equipment crate, half buried in sandbags behind her. Inside it, water, backup batteries, spare scopes, and the DMR rifle. She hadn't touched it since arriving. She wasn't supposed to. She was a comms tech. But right now, the radio was silent, and her team was heading into a kill zone. And she was the only one who knew it. She looked back toward the compound, heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't a drill. Something was coming, and the ridge, her quiet little station above it, all was about to become the front line. The silence was louder now, deafening almost. Corporal Elena Ramirez stared into her headset, tapping the earpiece gently, as if that might bring back the voices she'd grown used to hearing all morning. Echo actual, this is Ridge Point 1. Do you read? Her voice was steady, but her throat was dry. Repeat, do you copy? No answer, only static. She ran a quick diagnostic again. Comms were still green. Antenna power was strong. Dish realigned twice. Everything on her end was working. The equipment wasn't failing. If she had signal, and they weren't answering, that left only one explanation. They couldn't, or someone didn't want them to. Her eyes jumped to the drone feed. The patrol was still moving, their dark figures slicing across the valley floor. The creek bed ahead was dry, like most this time of year, but the walls on either side were tall 10 feet of natural cover for anyone lying in wait. A textbook ambush point. She'd marked it yesterday during recon, even noted it in her recommendations. But it had been dismissed as low risk. She zoomed in on the east bank. Dust was disturbed in 2 straight lines. Boot prints, fresh, then movement, subtle, shadows. Shifting behind a broken-down wall, she panned to the left. There, barely visible in the thermal overlay, 3 human signatures flat against the earth. One had a long silhouette rifle length. Another adjusted, just slightly to reposition. Jesus, she whispered. They're setting up. She felt it deep in her gut. Now what had started as a prickling instinct was screaming at her. Something wasn't just off. It was wrong. This was the setup. A classic L-shaped ambush. An Echo Patrol was walking straight into it. Her breath caught in her throat. She moved without thinking, grabbing the encrypted tablet and switching to multi-drone view. She pulled 2 units farther back, giving her wider coverage. There, in the upper left quadrant, more heat signatures moving fast, climbing the south face. Flankers, she muttered. God, they're flanking. Elena bolted upright and sprinted to her gear pile. She tore open the second crate with shaking fingers. Inside, under layers of cloth and spare parts, lay the DMR rifle. Matte black, lightweight, scoped. Untouched since she arrived. Unissued unauthorized but this wasn't protocol. Any more she yanked it free, checked the magazine, chambered around, and moved to the lip of the ridge, crawling low. The wind hit her hard, whipping dust across her face. She settled behind a flat rock shelf, nestled the rifle into her shoulder, and looked through the scope below. Echo Patrol had reached the mouth of the creek bed. They still didn't know. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She grabbed the headset mic again, voice firmer this time. Echo Actual, this is Ridgepoint 1. You are entering a hot zone. Multiple hostile thermal contacts. Creek bed is compromised. Pull back immediately. Silence then a crackle. Ridge, chhh. This is Echo, Here, stat. The signal died again. Her hand gripped the scope tighter. Come on, she whispered. Then she saw tiny flashes on the east ridge wall. Metal glinting. Muzzle flare, barely visible in the morning sun. She squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, breathing deep. Slow inhale. Slow exhale. Her body wanted to panic. Her training wouldn't let it. She opened her eyes again and called the drone to scan the cliff edge. There's 7 heat signatures now. All prone. Rifles in place. Coordinated. The whole valley was rigged. A perfect kill zone, and she was the only one who knew. She raised the rifle and locked in on the leader, the man standing near a rock outcropping, hand raised, giving silent signals. She could see him clearly now. Calm, professional, a team leader. If he was eliminated, the ambush might stall. It wouldn't stop the shooting, but it could disrupt the planned night time. A few seconds. Maybe enough. But she'd never fired in combat. Not once. She'd trained, qualified, drilled. But this was different. One mistake could cost lives, or save them. She tightened her grip, settled her breathing, and centered the crosshairs on the man's chest. Range, 780 meters. Wind, 6 knots westward. Drop, 11.4 inches. Her brain worked fast, calculating. She whispered the prayer her mother used to say before tests or doctor visits. Not for luck, but for focus. Then she squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked into her shoulder. The shot echoed down the ridge like thunder. Through the scope, she saw the man jerk backward. Collapsed. And everything exploded. Gunfire erupted below, but disorganized, now chaotic. Some insurgents fired blindly. Others scattered. The clean, precise ambush had become a confused firefight. Elena pulled back, chambered another round, and adjusted her position. She saw Echo Patrol react, ducking, seeking cover. One soldier fell, hit in the leg. The others responded fast, dragging him behind a rock outcrop. Their weapons came up. Kessler barked orders, muffled but alive. She hadn't stopped the attack, but she'd changed the game. She pressed the headset button again. Voice hard and clear now. Echo Actual, this is Ridge Point 1. Enemy leader is down. Multiple contacts on both ridges. You are still compromised in gauge and fall back westward. Coordinates incoming. This time, Kessler's voice broke through. Ramirez? That was. You? Affirmative, she said. Sending fallback route now. A pause. Copy. We're moving. She didn't smile. Didn't breathe easy. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first explosion split the air like a thunderclap. Corporal Elena Ramirez flinched as the valley below lit up in a flash of orange and smoke. Then came the delayed boom-raw concussive, ripping through the silence. The second blast followed. Barely 2 seconds later, this one closer to the creek bed. Ilana's hands flew to her binoculars. Dust swirled, disorienting. Bodies scrambled for cover. A scream crackled faintly through her headset, followed by overlapping radio chatter. Panicked, fragmented, raw. Elena, this is Echo taking fire from... Lane is hit. Multiple hostiles left ridge. Where the hell is it coming from? The calm order of Echo Patrol shattered in a heartbeat. Elena dropped the binoculars and threw herself behind the ridge's rock wall. Dust kicked up around her as distant gunfire echoed like hammers beating steel. She didn't have to see the enemy to know they had the high ground. Worse, it was coordinated. They'd been waiting, and her one shot that dropped the leader had bought them maybe 20 seconds. 20 seconds wasn't nearly enough. Her hands moved fast. She activated the drone interface again and pulled the remaining 2 aircraft into closer orbit, running thermal and motion tracking across the upper slopes. What she saw made her blood run cold. There weren't just 7 insurgents. There were at least 18. Some were flanking south. Others crawled into firing positions behind low stone ruins. One group sprinted west toward the fallback route she'd just given Echo. They were trying to cut them off. Elena to Echo Actual, she said, trying to keep her voice level. New. Hostiles converging on western fallback. Estimate 18 total. You are surrounded on 3 sides. A beat of static. Then Kessler's voice came through, breathless. Copy. Lane is down. Doyle's bleeding bad. Returning fire and moving. Can you suppress North Ridge? Suppress? She looked at the DMR lying beside her .1 rifle. 1 shooter. Against a dozen enemies with AKs and RPGs? But what choice did she have? Elena grabbed the rifle and crawled back to her previous firing position, adjusting her angle to face the northern slope. Her heart beat in her throat. She hadn't fired more than 5 live rounds in training, but there wasn't time to think. Every second the patrol was pinned down meant another body bleeding in the dust. She found the first target, an insurgent. Crouched behind a boulder, firing bursts into the creek bed. Breathe in. Center. Squeeze. She fired. The man crumpled backward. Another target darted across an opening. She tracked him and fired again, missed, readjusted. Shot once more. Hit. Spun and dropped. Her hands shook slightly. Not from fear. From focus so sharp it hurt. Elena, North Ridge hot, she radioed. Taking shots. 2 down. Sending GPS to drone 1 marking suppressed targets. From below, she could see Echo Patrol moving, dragging Lane and Doyle behind a low wall. Kessler waved, gesturing to others to advance. But the fire was still too heavy. Another explosion tore through the rock behind them, flinging debris. 1 soldier fell to his knees, coughing. They wouldn't make it unless the enemy's fire broke. Elena didn't hesitate. She moved again, belly flat. Along the ridge, shifting 30 feet west to a higher point. Her elbows dug into the dirt. She aligned her scope on the southern ridge this time. 2 more insurgents lay prone, aiming down into the patrol's fallback path. She fired. 1 dropped. Immediately, the second turned, confused, rising to run. She shot again. He fell. Elena to Echo south flanked, disrupted. You've got 20 meters of open ground. Move now. Kessler's voice answered immediately. Copy. Moving. Through her scope, she saw the patrol break cover. 3 soldiers sprinted, carrying Doyle between them. Another fired backward, covering. They disappeared behind a shattered adobe. Wall. Her breath caught. They made it, but it wasn't over. Bullets pinged into the rocks near her. One hit just above her left arm, sending chips of stone into her cheek. She ducked, rolling to her right. Pain flared in her shoulder, scraped, but not shot. They'd spotted her. She grabbed the rifle and crawled lower, angling herself between 2 jagged outcrops. More fire crackled around her. She couldn't see the shooter, but she saw the muzzle flash from a slope just to the north. Her drone pinned it 120 meters away. Too close. She couldn't stay here. Elena to base command, she said, switching channels. Reach point 1 under fire. Engaging direct contact. Patrol under siege, requesting immediate QRF at Grid Echo. 721. No answer. Repeat, requesting quick reaction force. Echo Grid 721. Firefight in progress. Still silence. Comms were jammed, or maybe base was too far, or too slow. Either way, it was her and the patrol now. She exhaled sharply and steadied herself. The muzzle flash appeared again. She aimed, led the shot by half a second, and pulled. The trigger. The rifle cracked. Silence. She stayed still. No. More flashes. Dead hit. She took the next 10 seconds to scan everything left: ridge, creek bed, compound ruins. Insurgents were pulling back now. A few bodies lay still. Others were running. Echo Patrol was regrouped and fortified behind the southern rock wall. She'd done it, not won the fight, but held the line. From her headset came Kessler's voice, clearer this time. Reach point, Ramirez. You still up? Still up, she replied, throat dry. You just saved our asses. She let the silence hang. Then. Copy that. Elena Ramirez could still taste grit in her mouth, the bitter chalk of powdered rock and gunpowder mixing on her tongue. Her left shoulder throbbed from where the debris had nicked her, but she didn't stop moving. She couldn't, not now. She crawled across the ridge's edge, dragging the DMR close, repositioning between 2 craggy rock outcrops that offered both elevation and cover. From this new angle, she could see more of the southern slope, where some of the surviving insurgents were regrouping, trying to retake control of the chaos she'd just thrown them into. Her hands trembled for a second, then stopped. She wasn't nervous anymore. She was dialed in, fully present. Every heartbeat was a beat in the tempo of war, and she was keeping time with her trigger finger. Below, Echo Patrol was still pinned, but reorganized. Kessler had split the group into 2 fire teams. One covered, one moved. They were retreating west toward a set of ancient terraces, small farming plots long since abandoned, but now offering layers of stone walls and switchbacks, a natural fallback route. But their enemies were watching 2 in her scope. Elena caught a trio of figures, moving toward the higher end of the terrace trail. Their movements were cautious, disciplined. One had binoculars, scanning ahead, likely a spotter. The others carried what looked like rifles with longer barrels, probably PKMs. Machine guns. If they got into position before Echo moved, the patrol would be slaughtered. Elena marked the coordinates on her drone and zoomed in. Echo Actual. This is Ridge Point 1. You've got a heavy team moving to the west slope upper terrace. Ada 2 minutes. If they dig in, they'll cut your escape route. A breathless pause. Copy that. Can you stop them? She didn't hesitate. I'll try. She rolled to her side and took a deep breath, realigning the rifle. The DMR was built for this precision at long range. She wasn't just support anymore. She was Overwatch. She was all they had. The first target crouched behind a crumbled wall, peeking over. Breathe in. Exhale. Squeezed out. The shot rang out. The spotter collapsed instantly, falling backward like a puppet with its strings cut. The other two hesitated, startled. Elena shifted her position quickly and fired again. Missed. She fired a third time. Hit one in the shoulder. He screamed and dropped his weapon. The last man bolted for cover, firing wildly toward the ridge. His round smacked into the rocks several feet below her, but she didn't flinch. She already had him in her sights. One more squeeze of the trigger, and he was gone. Elena to Echo Actual, she called. Terrace is clear. Move now. Kessler's voice came back, low and urgent. Moving, Ramirez. Hell of a shot. She didn't answer. Not out of modesty. There just wasn't time. She pulled up the drone feed again. It showed 2 new heat signatures at the far side of the creek bed, circling wide. One carried what appeared to be a launcher. RPG. Her heart skipped. Elena to Echo possible RPG 2 clicks east. Tracking now. If they were allowed to fire from that distance, the patrol wouldn't even make it halfway through the terraces. She had to stop them. She dropped to a crouch and sprinted along the ridge to a narrow saddle between boulders. Adrenaline overriding fatigue. She threw herself into prone, aimed, and found the launcher-wielding figure adjusting his aim. His companion pointed toward Echo Patrol's last known position. No time for a clean shot. No time for calculations. She fired. The RPG man twisted and dropped. The second figure stumbled and ducked. Too late. Elena's second shot hit him square in the back. She stayed still, breath shallow, listening. The valley had quieted. No new fire, no more explosions. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the stillness after a storm. She toggled to wide thermal scan. Echo Patrol had reached the terraces. No more heat signatures ahead. No more bodies in wait. They were safe for now. The battlefield had stretched across half a kilometer. And yet, from her ridge, she'd seen all of it, manipulated it, even. Like a chess player above the board. Except, here, every piece had a beating heart. She slumped behind the boulder, her rifle across her chest. Sweat rolled down her temple and into the scratch on her cheek, making it sting. Her shoulder ached more now. Her hands, sticky with dust and blood, finally began to shake. She let them, because she'd earned it. Over her radio, Sergeant Kessler's voice came again, steady but no longer barking. Ridgepoint, this is Echo. All accounted for. Minimal casualties. I repeat, all accounted for. A pause. You saved us. All of us. She stared out across the valley. Smoke still curled from the creek bed. Bodies, both friend and foe, lay scattered like broken toys in a child's forgotten sandbox. And she, the one who was never meant to fire a shot, had made all the difference. Copy, Echo, she replied quietly, holding position. Let me know when extraction is in range. The line stayed open a few seconds longer. Then Kessler spoke again, softer this time. Ramirez, you're not just support anymore. She smiled faintly, not because she needed to hear it, but because they finally knew it too. Smoke hung like fog over the valley as the sun reached its peak, casting long shadows behind crumbling walls and shattered stone. From her position on the ridge, Corporal Elena Ramirez stayed locked to her scope, scanning for movement. Her shoulder throbbed, her face was scratched, and her hands ached from the tight grip she'd kept on the rifle for nearly an hour. But she stayed focused, because now every second mattered. Echo Patrol had begun moving again, slower this time, more controlled. The wounded were being carried in rotations. The rest fanned out in a tight cover formation as they descended the terrace trail. Their extraction point was still almost 2 kilometers out, past a field of collapsed irrigation trenches and a dirt road barely wide enough for the approaching MRAP convoy. But they were moving. They were alive. And it all came back to that one shot. The first shot. The one that took out the ambush leader. Elena hadn't known who he was at the time. She just saw a man giving hand signals, coordinating movements, standing in plain view of half a dozen hidden gunmen. She didn't have time to analyze his rank or status. She followed instinct. And in that instant, she'd changed everything. A single well-placed round had shattered the entire plan. Had it been 30 seconds later, or if she'd hesitated, at all Echo Patrol would have been torn apart in that valley. Instead, the enemy had fallen into confusion. Their advantage dissolved. And Elena, from her lone perch above it all, had turned into their worst nightmare. She adjusted the rifle and blinked, sweat from her eyes. Her drone feed showed 2 vehicles closing in from the northwest, armored transports from Forward Operating Base Lazarus. The cavalry they'd gotten. Her QRF request, after all, late, but not too late. Elena to Echo Actual, she said into the headset, voice steady now despite the chaos. Rescue convoy is 3 mics out. I repeat, QRF inbound from Northwest Trail. Copy that, Kessler replied, his tone lighter than it had been all day. How's it look up there? Any movement? She scanned her quadrant again. No new heat signatures. Last hostiles retreated north 5 mics ago. I've got eyes on everything. There was a pause before he answered. You're a damn machine, Ramirez. She allowed herself a dry chuckle. Not a machine. Just got lucky with my first shot. No, he replied firmly. That wasn't luck. His voice dropped a little, enough to make her sit up straighter. When Lane went down and Doyle was bleeding all over the rocks, we thought that was it. Everything was falling apart. But then your shot rang out. That moment, whatever it did to them, it did something to us too. We started fighting smarter, sharper. It was like we weren't out there alone anymore. She swallowed hard. That part she hadn't expected. The psychological shift. The morale. She thought her shot would disrupt the enemy. She hadn't realized it would stabilize her team. From the drone's bird's eye view, the patrol looked like a slow-moving stream of ants winding their way back to the landing zone. Each figure now moved with more caution, yes, but also with renewed purpose. They weren't retreating. They were recovering, and she had helped give them that chance. Elena leaned back against the rock and looked up at the sky, letting herself breathe for the first time in hours. The sky was that sharp desert blue again, brushed with high wisps of clouds. Somewhere far to the east, she thought she heard the rotors of a chopper, but it might have just been wind. Her fingers tapped lightly on the rifle's barrel. She traced the scratches on the casing, remembering how carefully she'd trained with it back at Fort Bliss. How many times she'd shot at cardboard silhouettes, wondering if she'd ever need it. And now the rifle was coated in dust. The paint scuffed from dragging it across rocks, its muzzle hot from repeated shots fired in anger and necessity. The comms crackled again. Ridgepoint, this is QRF-21. Approaching Western Trailhead. What's your position? Elena stood slowly, stretching sore muscles, then keyed the mic. 2-1, Ridgepoint 1. I'm positioned at grid 721, 200 meters above Southern Valley. No injuries requiring evac. Echo Patrol is en route to you now, westbound through Terrace Trail. Enemies neutralized or retreated. Area appears secure. Copy that, Ridgepoint. Standing by for visual on friendlies. She watched as the MRAPs crested the ridge, in the distance hulking metal beasts shimmering in the heat waves. Their turrets scanned the terrain cautiously, But there were no shots fired. No resistance. The battlefield had gone quiet. And as the vehicles rumbled toward the extraction point, Helena finally allowed herself to sit properly, this time. She leaned her back against the stone and closed her eyes for just a moment. She had done her job. No more than that. She had done something nobody expected of her. Something that changed not just the outcome of a battle, but how people would see her from now on. She'd never call herself a hero. That word was too big, too full of medals and parades. But she was something more than support. Now, she was the one who fired the shot that changed everything, and the people she saved, Echo Patrol, would carry that truth with them for the rest of their lives. The rotors beat against the sky like war drums as the Black Hawk descended into the extraction zone. Dust exploded in a wide circle, whipping across the narrow trail where Echo Patrol waited, crouched low behind cover, shielding their wounded. Corporal Elena Ramirez remained prone on the ridge, watching the entire scene unfold through her binoculars with a mix of exhaustion and focus. The MRAP convoy had reached the lower terraces 10 minutes earlier, sweeping the perimeter. No contact, no gunfire, no new signatures on thermal. It was over, at least for now, but Elena didn't move. Not yet, not until every member of Echo Patrol was loaded onto that bird. She followed Sergeant Kessler's form as he limped forward, one arm wrapped in a blood-stained sling. Corporal Lane was being carried on a stretcher by two others. Doyle leaned against a medic, his face pale but determined. One by one, they climbed into the chopper's hull, leading behind blood-soaked earth and the broken bones of an ambush. That had failed only because one woman on a ridge refused to be a bystander. As the last boots lifted off the ground, Kessler turned his head and looked up. She couldn't see his eyes from that distance, but she saw the gesture, a sharp nod, a raised hand. Not just acknowledgement, but something deeper. Respect. She lowered the binoculars and let out a long breath, her ribs aching from tension and strain. Her knees were sore, her elbows scraped raw, her right arm bruised from rifle recoil. The desert had taken its toll, but she had stood her ground. As the helicopter lifted and veered away, Ramirez sat back on the ridge for the first time since the firefight began. The valley below had gone eerily quiet again. The smoke had mostly cleared. The bodies remained small, dark stains against the yellow-gray terrain, but they felt distant now, like shadows from another world. She wasn't thinking about glory. Not medals, not reports, not the after-action debriefs that would undoubtedly follow. Her thoughts weren't even on herself. They were on the men she'd saved. Her teammates, her family. She pulled her knees up to her chest and sat in the shade of a leaning boulder, letting her heartbeat finally slow. The wind brushed her face with the scent of gunpowder and dust. She let it wash over her. For the first time in hours, there was nothing to do. No more targets. No more warnings to shout into the void. Still, her mind refused to fully quiet. She kept replaying it. The patrol pinned down, Lane screaming, the RPG team climbing the slope. The moment she saw their leader and decide, without hesitation, that she would not let Echo Patrol die today. It had never been about permission. It had been about responsibility. Her radio crackled, breaking the stillness. "Elena, this is Echo Actual," Kessler's voice said, tired, bruised, and sincere. "Do you copy?" She pressed the mic. "Copy. Go ahead. We're airborne. Headed back to base. Lane stable. Doyle too. Minor injuries across the rest. QRF swept the zone. No contacts remaining. They're prepping to send a recovery. Crew for the dead." She swallowed. "Understood." There was a pause then. "Ramirez, today you weren't just eyes on a screen." "I know. No, you don't get it." His voice dropped lower. I've led 26 patrols through valleys like that one. We've had bad intel, close calls, and plenty of miracles. But I've never seen anything like what you did today." Elena said nothing. "You changed the course of the entire fight from a rock pile 200 meters above us. That's not support. That's command. That's firepower. That's being the reason we all get to go home." The words hit her differently than she expected. She thought she'd feel pride, relief, some sense of vindication, but all she felt was weight. "The weight of lives carried." She replied softly. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Damn right," he said. "When we land, they'll probably want you to stay behind a desk and fill out half a forest's worth of paperwork. But just so you know, you're coming on the next patrol. My team, your rifle." She smiled faintly. "Thought you didn't like sharing the spotlight. I don't, but I'll make an exception." With that, the line went quiet. Elena sat back against the rock, watching the Black Hawk vanish into the blue sky. She wasn't just a Cums tech anymore, not to them, not to herself. She was the woman who saw what no one else could, who acted when no one else did, who held the line when it threatened to collapse completely. She was support, yes, but she was also the shot that changed everything. And from this day forward, the ridge wouldn't just be a lookout point. It would be remembered as the place where a quiet soldier proved that courage doesn't always come from the front lines. Sometimes it comes from the shadows above, watching, waiting, and finally answering the call. 2 days later, Corporal Elena Ramirez stood alone on the very ridge where it had all happened. The battlefield below was silent, now cleared of bodies, scrubbed of evidence, reduced to scorched rock and ash-blown winds. Only the dark streaks of soot on the dirt hinted at what had occurred. She had returned not on orders, but by choice. Her rifle rested across her back, a fresh sling wrapped around her healing shoulder. Her uniform, now cleaned, still bore the faded red patches where blood had dried. Her boots, dusted white from the hike, stood firmly on the same ledge she had crouched behind during the ambush. Below her, the valley looked deceptively peaceful. The terraces that had once been killing fields were just stacked earth now. The creek ran shallow and crooked. No enemies, no allies, just silence. And that was why she came. Back. Not for war, but for peace. For memory. The day after the extraction. Her name had spread through the forward operating base like wildfire. People she didn't know were saluting her in the halls. Commander shook her hand. The base commander even mentioned a commendation. Bronze Star with Valor. Maybe more. She accepted none of it easily. Praise made her uncomfortable. The spotlight? Even more so. Because in her mind, she kept replaying the face of the first man she killed, the cold accuracy, the look of surprise that never had time to finish forming. Then the second shot, and the third. All the ones after, everyone told her it was justified. Everyone told her she'd saved lives, but no one told her how to carry it. That's why she came back. To face it one last time, to remind herself it had been real. As she looked across the ridgeline, she saw a dust cloud rising in the distance. A single figure approached on foot, weaving through the old goat trails and rocky ledges. It wasn't until they got close that she recognized the broad shoulders and familiar gait. Sergeant Kessler. He wore his duty fatigues, a cap pulled low over his eyes, and a bandage on his forearm. He stopped a few feet away, hands on his hips, breathing a little harder than he probably wanted her to see. "Didn't think I'd find you up here," he said after a pause. She gave a half smile. "Didn't expect you to follow. Figured I owed it to you. Patrol leaves in 2 days. Thought you might want to know." She nodded, eyes never leaving the valley. They stood in silence for a few minutes, the breeze tugging softly at their sleeves. He sat down on a nearby boulder, resting his elbows on his knees. I've been in country 4 rotations, he said finally. Seen more than I ever wanted. Good guys, bad guys. Brave acts, dumb mistakes. But what you did that day, he looked at her. That was something else. I was scared, she said quietly. Good, he replied without hesitation. The day we stop being scared is the day we stop thinking clearly. She crouched down again, right where she had first spotted the enemy movement. You know, she said, before this, I thought support was enough. I figured if I stayed sharp on the drone, kept the comms clean, relayed what you needed when you needed it, that I was doing my part. That was my limit. It's not, he said. She nodded. I know that now. But it changed me, Kessler. That first shot, it wasn't just a trigger pull. It was a line I crossed. And there's no going back. He looked at her, solemn. None of us go back. We just carry it forward. She turned to him. How do you carry it? He exhaled, long and slow, by remembering why I did it. By remembering who I saved. And by never letting one moment, no matter how hard, define everything else I am. She considered that. It made sense. Not in a comforting way, but in a grounding way. Then she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since that day. Do you think I belong out there? On the next patrol? He looked at her like she was the only person on the mountain. Ramirez, he said, if I could put you on every ridge in every valley across this country, I would. I trust you with every man and woman under my command. Hell, I trust you. With my life. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They sat for a while longer, watching as the sun began its slow descent behind the jagged ridges. When it was time to leave, they rose together, the wind lifting the silence between them like a flag dot as they walked back toward base. Elena glanced back one last time at the ridge. She'd arrived there as just another support soldier, an extra set of eyes, a quiet presence. Behind the screen, she was leaving as something else, not because she wanted to be a hero, but because, when the moment came, she didn't hesitate. She chose to act, and in doing so, she had saved them all. The ridge would always remember her. Now, she was ready for whatever came next.